Hello and welcome back to Mythcrafts. My name is Dr. Emma Woods and I'm a mythologist, a folklorist and an author, and I run Mythcrafts with my husband Shiva Kumar. So today we're talking about sewer monsters and exploring just some of the urban legends that have been told throughout the ages. We're going all the way back to the 2nd century CE. Now, indoor plumbing is one of the greatest advancements of civilization. It allows fresh running water and human waste disposal at our fingertips. But this technology required the excavation of massive underground structures, starting with the aqueducts of ancient civilizations to the systems of tunnels and treatment plants that we have today. For those of us growing up in the late 80s and 90s, we caught glimpses of the vast networks of underground tunnels beneath the cities as we watched our favourite crime-fighting quartet, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, chase bad guys through the never-ending network of tunnels. It was a dark, labyrinthine world that got infinitely scarier when Stephen King stuck a clown down there. And how many of us have experienced our first brush with death and funeral rites while standing solemnly around the toilet bowl as our parents said a few words before poor old Goldie the goldfish was flushed into another world. Dark and hidden, we can only imagine what lurks beneath, so it is no wonder that the sewers have become a source of urban legends throughout the ages. One of the most persistent sewer-based urban legends of our time involves a race of mutant albino alligators living in the sewers of New York City. These stories tell us these poor alligators started off as baby pets. They were carried back to New York City from Florida as tourist trinkets, only to be flushed down the toilet when they became too big for their owner's liking. These alligators were said to thrive in the watery underground tunnels, feeding off the millions of rats that lived alongside them as they grew into legend. It is said that the lack of sunlight turned them white, a trait they passed on through the generations as they bred and multiplied beneath the bustling city streets. While these stories have mostly been dismissed as urban legends, and most herpetologists agree that the New York City climate was too cold for alligators to survive, we have still seen the occasional alligator or caiman that has popped up in New York City. Sadly, these are all believed to be recently displaced animals, and they probably wouldn't have survived the winter, rather than descendants from a lineage of subterranean mythical beasts. In the Victorian era, the UK had its own version of sewer-dwelling monsters, the black swine of Hampstead. Legend has it that a pregnant sow fell into the opening of a sewer and into the tunnels beneath the city. There she gave birth, feeding her offspring on the rubbish that was continually washed down into the sewers. In his book, London Labour and the London Poor, Volume 2, Henry Mayhew recounted this legend in saying, "There is a strange tale in existence among the shore workers of a race of wild hogs inhabiting the sewers in the neighbourhood of Hampstead. The story runs that a sow in young, by some accident, got down to the sewer through an opening and, wandering away from the spot, littered and reared her offspring in the drain, feeding on the offal and garbage that washed into it continually. Here it is alleged the breed multiplied exceedingly and have become almost as ferocious as they are numerous." This legend continued to grow, telling us how the swine colony evolved. The feral pigs were interbreeding with each other to produce new offspring, each more monstrous and deformed than the last litter. The swine began feasting on the plague-ridden sewer rats that inhabited the sewers beside them, but they eventually turned on each other once the rat colonies became depleted. These feral creatures became cannibals that devoured their weaker offspring, ensuring only the strongest survived. They passed on their genes to the next generation as they grew larger, stronger, and more ferocious. As the Black Plague took hold and as London sickened, this legend grew. As corpses began to find their way into the rivers and sewers, they were seen as evidence that these swine had developed a taste for human flesh. Luckily for the surviving inhabitants of London, the swine resided on the Hampstead side of the river. The strong current of the Fleet Ditch kept the pigs at bay and away from the outlets where they could escape from the sewers. Yet the swine grew stronger with each breeding cycle, and there was always the possibility that the next generation would be the ones that could finally escape from their watery prison. We can find these tales of sewer-dwelling monsters as far back as there were sewers, even back to the early structures of ancient Rome. In his book on the characteristics of animals from the 2nd century CE, we find another sewer monster. This time it's a giant octopus. The writer Alien recounts that it swam up through a subterranean sewer that discharged the refuse of the aforesaid city into the sea, and emerged in a house on the shore where some Iberian merchants had their cargo. That is, pickled fish from that country in immense jars. It threw its tentacles round the earthenware vessels, and with its grip broke them and feasted on the pickled fish. And when the merchants entered and saw the broken pieces, they realized that a large quantity of their cargo had disappeared, and they were amazed and could not guess who had robbed them. They saw that no attempt had been made upon the doors. The roof was undamaged, the walls had not been broken through. Alien's story continued, describing how the merchants dispatched a trusted servant to the storehouse, waiting for the culprit to strike again. The poor man was stupefied as he saw massive tentacles reach through the grates, crushing giant earthenware vessels with ease. Understanding that those tentacles could crush a man with the same ease, the servant hid until the octopus had finally finished feasting. Surviving the night, he ran back to report the strange news. The following evening, the merchants gathered a crew of their strongest men, arming them with weapons. As the octopus thief struck again that night, they attacked, hacking him to death in the tunnels. As we increasingly move into urban settings, the traditional scary woods are becoming harder to find, and they're being replaced by other environments. The sewer tunnels running under the cities, disused subway stations and abandoned houses become new places where the unknown can lurk or haunt. These are spaces that aren't filled with the light and movement of everyday life. These are the places where shadows can be concealed within our urban jungles. These are the places that the monsters now lurk. So I hope you enjoyed this video today. If you did, please remember to subscribe to our channel and drop a like below. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.